Hey guys, it's Kara from Lovely Etc. And today I'm going to be sharing how to turn old maps into absolutely gorgeous wallpaper. I am so excited with how this project turned out. It's something I've been wanting to do for years and it turned out even better than I ever imagined. So today I'm going to be sharing all about how to find great maps to use for this, how to flatten out all the wrinkles so that they actually work on the wall, how to attach them so that they're not ruined forever, and finally how to figure out a layout that actually looks good. Okay, so why maps? I am a bit obsessed with maps. I've used them over the years in all kinds of different decor and DIY projects, from framing maps as art to decoupaging maps onto furniture, and there's a lot of reasons that I love maps. I think that visually maps can be incredibly beautiful. I love the graphic nature, the colors, and I especially love old maps because I like to think about how these maps are what enabled people to travel and explore new places and take trips with their families. Maps are just all about adventure and exploration and finding something new, and I love all of that. So this map wall is in my oldest son's room. He's almost 12. And his room has been pretty sad since we moved in here about 8 months ago. His bed has just been a mattress on the floor, and he has some random furniture from his room at our old house that sort of works. I figured it was definitely time for us to do something about this. So I have a whole plan for the room. He's really excited about it. I'm really excited about it. And the first step is creating this map wall. Luckily, he loves maps just as much as I do, so this is the perfect start. If you're gonna wallpaper an entire wall with maps, or even do some other project with maps, you're gonna need a lot of maps. Where are you gonna find them? I personally love to shop secondhand. I go to lots of estate sales and thrift stores, yard sales, whenever I get the chance. And maps are one of those things that I am always on the lookout for. Sometimes they're hard to find, sometimes you come across a whole bunch. It really just depends. I found a huge chunk of my maps at one estate sale. There was a big box in the basement full of a whole bunch of road maps, and the entire box, which probably had 50 maps in it, was 10 bucks. So I snatched it up immediately. You may not be so lucky, but I have also stumbled across maps at lots of other antique stores and yard sales and thrift stores, and I found that the price can vary wildly. Sometimes maps are super expensive because they're old or special, and sometimes they're really cheap because these are just basic things that a lot of people consider outdated. So most of the maps I used on my wall were just these folded up road maps that people used. They would keep them in their glove box when they're actually traveling, so these are not like fancy meant to be framed maps, but they still look amazing. So the majority of these are AAA maps, or maps from gas stations, or pullouts from National Geographic magazine, other ways to get maps other than checking out estate sales and thrift stores. You can find vintage maps if that's what you're really looking for online. Etsy usually has a bunch of options. Of course, you can check places like Facebook Marketplace, but it's a lot more hit and miss. You can also buy new maps. You can buy map posters, which are not folded up, and so you don't have to worry about the whole wrinkle situation. There are lots of really beautiful map posters available with maps of famous cities, maps of countries, national parks, all kinds of places. It's going to be more expensive, but if you do it that way, you can also choose maps that are special to you or that you especially love. So it does give you more options. And I'll be sure to link down in the video description to some different places where you can find awesome maps. So as I mentioned, the majority of the maps I used were inexpensive, folded up road maps, kind of like this. So as you can imagine, they had a lot of wrinkles. So I did a couple of different things to try to get the wrinkles out. So first I did the old flatten it out with heavy object trick. So I unfolded the maps that I wanted to use, laid them out flat in a stack on a hardwood floor, which is a nice hard surface. And then on top I put some scrap pieces of plywood to help flatten out the whole thing, and then some heavy boxes of books on top of that. And then I left them there for about 24 hours. This did really help flatten out the wrinkles. It made a pretty big difference, but it didn't come close to getting them completely flat. So for the maps that were still pretty wrinkled, I actually ironed them with a clothes iron. And if you're wondering, yes, this does work, but you do need to be careful. It won't necessarily work on all types of maps. Some maps are vinyl, some are plastic, some are paper, some are heavy paper, some are super thin. So you need to be careful and just use your best judgment. But this is something that professional framers sometimes do, so I decided to give it a try. So for my maps, I just got a slightly damp paper towel and I wiped it over all of the wrinkles, and then I placed a piece of parchment paper over the map and put the iron on top of that on a low setting. So it's not really recommended to iron directly onto your map, just in case ink bleeds, something gets burned, it's better to have a protective layer. And after using the wet paper towel and ironing over the maps, it again made a significant difference. Now, even with the iron trick, nobody would say that my maps are completely smooth. I'm fine with it. What I am happy with is that by using the heavy books and using the iron, all the maps are flat enough that they are sticking to the wall well and the wrinkles are not distracting. So when you're planning your layout of how you want your maps to go on the wall, there are no hard and fast rules. But I personally do recommend trying to figure out some of how you want to lay things out before you start just attaching things to the wall, because there are some things to keep in mind to help everything just look balanced and beautiful. You don't want all the maps that are mostly green in one spot. You don't want all of the big huge maps in one spot. For my own wall, I tried to make sure that there were maps of all different colors throughout the wall, maps of different sizes, that all the city street maps weren't in the same spot, that all the topography maps weren't in the same spot. So everything was kind of balanced and your eye kept going throughout the whole wall. And I also wanted to make sure that there was really interesting looking maps everywhere you looked. So there's a few different ways to figure out your layout. I am a very perfectionistic, detail-oriented, however you want to say it, type of person. So I measured my whole wall, and I had enough space in another room to tape out the measurements of the wall on the floor and lay out my maps there. Now, if I hadn't had that extra space, I would have just done it in this room, moved all the furniture away from the wall or even out of the room, and laid all the maps out on the floor directly in front of the wall, which would also give you the right dimensions. You can also skip that and just kind of sort your maps, so figure out which ones you think are the main, most impactful, colorful maps that you definitely want to spread out, and then figure out the placement of those and then just fill in all around them. To me, that's difficult because you want the maps to go all the way to each wall and all the way to the floor and the ceiling. And so you can do it on the fly, but it's going to require a lot of placing and then taking off and tweaking. But it is doable as long as you are okay with having to redo as you go. There are several different ways you can attach your maps to the wall, and they all kind of have different pros and cons. So many years ago, I used to sell painted furniture and decor at an antique store. And I created a wallpaper in my booth using old book pages and maps and just different types of paper. And in that case, I just Mod Podged everything onto the wall. Mod Podge is a decoupage medium. You apply it, then you put on the paper, then you apply it again to seal everything. Now the advantage was that wallpaper was very secure. Nobody was going to be able to catch a corner of a piece of paper and rip it off. Everything was shellacked to the wall. The disadvantage is it made the book pages get a bit more wrinkly, and then of course the biggest disadvantage is they were now permanent fixtures to the wall and could never be reused. Now those were just pages from old books, so that was fine. I had no intent of ever using them for anything else. However, I love these maps, and I didn't really want to do something so permanent when attaching these maps. So I considered a couple of different ideas for attaching them where it wouldn't destroy the maps and they could be removed in the future. One option was just using simple thumbtacks to attach them, putting one in each corner, and I strongly considered that, but then in the end I went with option 2, which is I used this Gorilla Glue mounting putty. There's a bunch of other stuff similar to this out there, I'm sure, but this is the one I've used in the past to hang up paper snowflakes at Christmas and kids' artwork that wasn't going to be there permanently, and I've always had good luck with it, not damaging the walls and not damaging the paper. So this is what I went with. This comes in a whole bunch of just little squares of putty, and you just tear one off and put it where you want it, on the back of the map, and then stick the map on the wall. So I did use a lot because I do want the maps to be secure, and I wanted the edges to be as secure to the wall as possible to prevent excess wear and tear. So I used anywhere from 8 to 20 on each map, depending on how big it was. I put them all around the corners and the edges, as well as some in the middles to make sure that they adhered really well. And that also helped because a lot of these maps are layered over other maps. And if I had only put it along the edges, then they might have only been attached to other maps and not directly to the wall, which is not ideal. So by putting them throughout the middle of the map as well, it really helped them just adhere better. As you're figuring out your layout, just remember that you can layer your maps. That makes it a lot easier to just shift things a little bit one way or the other so that your wall gets completely covered and so that you're showcasing the maps you love the most and maybe covering up a little bit more of the maps that are just kind of filling in the background. I did have a couple of outlets on my wall, and there's a few different ways you could handle that. I decided simply to use a map in this section that I didn't care quite as much about, and then use an X-Acto knife to cut out the holes behind, so then the outlet covers can just go right over the top. If you wanted, you could cover the plates with the wallpaper to make it blend in, but that is going to be a lot more complicated. And that's the finished map wall. I really love how this wall turned out. I love the color. I love just standing and studying the maps like a dork. And thankfully my son also really loves it. And now I'm excited to get to work finishing the rest of this room. I'm planning to build him a bed frame so that his poor mattress isn't on the floor anymore, and hang some art and do some other fun projects so that this room can finally be pulled together instead of just looking like we threw a bunch of stuff in here and forgot about it, which is kind of what happened, but we're ready to move past that phase. I'm sharing a written tutorial for this project over at my website, lovelyetc, where you'll find lots of tips for getting great results, links to places where you can find great maps to buy, and lots more photos. And if you haven't, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel, Lovely Etc., where I share inexpensive DIY ideas for creating a home that you love. See you next time.